If you wanted to say it's easy to learn French in French, what would you say? C'est facile à apprendre le français or c'est facile d'apprendre le français. The answer is c'est facile d'apprendre le français. But what if you wanted to express that same sentiment just a little bit differently? So instead of saying it's easy to learn French, what if you wanted to say French is easy to learn? Would you say le français est facile à apprendre or le français est facile d'apprendre? Le français est facile à apprendre. But why do we use à in one case and de in the other, even when they both translate to the same thing in French, which is the word to? It doesn't really seem to make sense, right? Well, like many things in French, the good news is there is a logic behind all this, and it's actually quite easy to grasp. It's just that for some reason, I haven't seen a single French textbook, nor a single video on YouTube covering this in detail. Most native French speakers don't really seem to know the rules behind all this either. They'll just say what sounds right based on intuition. I tutor French online, and this is something that I've noticed almost every one of my students getting wrong, even the most advanced ones. And I'm gonna try my best to put a stop to that today with this video. By the way, if you want to learn French with someone that's been exactly where you are, sign up for a free trial session with me with the link below. All right, without further ado, let's learn all about how to say to in French. First of all, out of the 3 ways to translate to in French, pour is definitely the easiest one to get the hang of. Think of it as the default way to say to in French, and it's what you'll use when the word to is not tied to any specific verb, adjective, or indefinite pronoun. So that's stuff like forget to, easy to, or a lot to. A great example would be the sentence, I'm gonna go out to meet my friends. Since the word to in this sentence is not tied to any one word in particular, and it's being used as a standalone preposition, pour is kind of the only way to go. So in French, this sentence would translate to Je vais sortir pour retrouver mes amis. If it helps, you can also think of pour as the equivalent of in order to in English. You use pour when you want to express a goal, and that's exactly how it was used in the sentence we just looked at. Another example would be I set up a budget to not spend too much. J'ai organisé un budget pour ne pas trop dépenser. And of course, pour can also mean for in French, but that's usually very easy to figure out from the context, whether it's being used as for or to, so no explanation needed there. All right, now that that's over with, let's look at how to translate to when it's linked to another word in the sentence. This is where you'll have to use à and de, and again, in order to know which one to use, it depends on whether the word that it's connected to is a verb, adjective, or an indefinite pronoun, because there are set rules for each of these categories. By the way, if you're confused by any of the technical vocabulary that I just used, don't worry. I'll make it very easy to understand. Just stick with me here. The rules are very simple for verbs and indefinite pronouns, so that's what we'll start with. I'll break down the rules for adjectives near the end, but that's definitely the most valuable part of the video, so make sure you watch until the end. Starting with verbs, it's very straightforward. There's no logic here, you don't have to think through any rules, because it's purely a matter of memorization. Let's look at an example where the word to comes after a verb. I chose to study French. J'ai choisi d'étudier le français. Why do we say choisir de instead of choisir à? Well, simply because it's a set deal. In the same way that continuer à, continue to, and oublier de, forget to, are fixed combinations as well. Here's a short list of the most common verbs like this that you'll run into. And honestly, there aren't that many that you need to memorize for everyday conversation. If you have any other common examples of verbs like this in mind, please feel free to share them in the comments below. Moving on to using the word to in French with indefinite pronouns, this is where it gets even easier. What I mean by indefinite pronouns are words like beaucoup, a lot, assez, enough, rien, nothing, quelque chose, something, etc., etc. Basically words that don't refer to anyone or anything in particular. And what makes this easy is that to is always translated as à here. For example, j'ai beaucoup de choses à apprendre, I have a lot of things to learn. J'ai assez à manger, I have enough to eat. J'ai rien à faire, I have nothing to do. J'ai quelque chose à vous demander, I have something to ask you. See the pattern? This is the easiest category of words to use to with in French, so I'm not going to spend any more time on this. So let's move on to the real meat and bones of this video, using to with adjectives in French. Now this is technically where there are the most rules, but trust me, once you do this enough times, you won't even have to think about the logic anymore. It'll just become intuitive. Unlike what we saw earlier with verbs and indefinite pronouns, where the choice between a and de is fixed depending on the word that it's linked to, it's not that simple with adjectives. Because even with the same adjective, you can use both a and de. It all depends on how you want to structure the sentence. Let's bring back what we saw at the very start of the video. C'est facile d'apprendre le français versus le français est facile à apprendre. How do we know whether to use a or de? Well, what you mainly need to remember is this. You use a when describing something that's already been mentioned in the sentence, and you use de when specifying new information about an action, for example. So with the sentence, le français est facile à apprendre, what we're doing here is we're describing something that we've already introduced, which in this case is le français, the French language. With the sentence, c'est facile d'apprendre le français, we're not really describing anything here. We're more so focused on adding new information by specifying what exactly is easy here, which in this case is the act of learning French. Again, we use a to point back to something that's already there to describe it, and we use de to introduce or specify an action. I know this might still sound a bit confusing, so let's look at a few other examples here, and I promise you, it'll all make sense within the next minute. C'est difficile à comprendre, it's hard to understand, versus c'est difficile de comprendre cette règle. It's hard to understand this rule. Again, notice how in the first sentence where we use difficile à, we're merely describing how hard something is to understand, while in the second sentence where we use difficile de, we're introducing new information and we're specifying what exactly is hard, which in this case is understanding a certain rule. Let's look at another example. C'est important à savoir, it's important to know, versus c'est important de savoir comment nager. It's important to know how to swim. Again, you'll notice that we use à here to describe the importance of something, and we use de when we're being very specific about an action. One last example. C'est impossible à faire, it's impossible to do, versus c'est impossible de faire ça autrement. It's impossible to do this any other way. You'll see that very naturally, sentences where you use à tend to run a lot shorter, and sentences where you use de tend to run a lot longer because you're always adding new information. So that's kind of another way you can identify which ones to use. This rule of using de to specify new information also applies even when there aren't any adjectives in the sentence. For example, je n'ai pas le temps de faire ça. I don't have the time to do this. J'ai la chance de voyager. I'm lucky to be traveling. Je n'ai aucune raison de mentir. I don't have any reason to lie. There is a big exception to this rule though, and that's when you have the subject performing an action. There are two possibilities here that decide whether you'll have to use a or de. If you're describing someone's emotional state when it comes to doing something, you'll always have to use de. For example, I'm sad to leave would be je suis triste de partir. I'm happy to see you would be je suis content de te voir. Here are some more examples on screen, and you can definitely see the pattern here. As for the other possibility where you're not describing emotions, you'll just use a, simple as that. The main examples here would be I'm ready to leave, je suis prêt à partir, and I'm willing to negotiate, je suis disposé à négocier. And voila, that's all the theory you need to know. So now that we've covered all the rules, let's try to practice with a short quiz. We'll go over 5 sentences and you'll have 5 seconds to fill in the blanks. Ready? Let's go. I watch YouTube videos to learn French. Je regarde des vidéos YouTube pour apprendre le français. I have things to do. J'ai des choses à faire. I decided to start learning French. J'ai décidé de commencer à apprendre le français. It's important to practice every day. C'est important de pratiquer tous les jours. This video is easy to follow. Cette vidéo est facile à suivre. All right, let me know if you got all those correct. If not, and if you're still a bit unsure about when to use à, de, and pour, please let me know as well, and I'll do my best to help clear up any confusion you might have right in the comments below. And again, if you want to cruise through all these little intricacies in French grammar with someone that knows how to make it easy for you, feel free to sign up for private French lessons with me with the link below. First call's free. Check out these videos here as well. They're very useful, especially if you're just starting out with French. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. Love you guys. Ciao.